Hafidades and Manana Sizos, colleagues, Imina 35 na legislature in Guam is called to order. And at this time, I would kindly ask that Senator Mary Torres lead us in prayer, and also that Senator Luis Muñoz also lead us after that with a special prayer presentation. So kindly, colleagues, please stand.
Ginaani Tata Ilahina Zani Spiritu Santo. Amen.
Amen.
Heavenly Father, this year has taught us how much we can impact the lives of others on our island, how vulnerable we truly are, and how faith and hope can sustain us. We ask you, dear Lord, to protect our community and our world. Psalm 5:11. Let all who take refuge in you be glad. Let them sing for joy. Spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may rejoice in you. Santa Maria Kamalin, si Zeus in Gwenegri Maria Bula hau gracia, si Zeus gaigi giza hagu, umatuna hau toru famalawan, zamatuna finigumo as Jesus. Santa Maria Nananzu Ustazuzuti Hamni Mani Sao Pagu Zani Oro Nifinatai Mami. Amen. Ginaani Tata Ilahina Zani Spiritu Santo. Amen.
Tata Ma Igaiki Hauki Matuna inamu, mamai lai go Vietnamu, mafatina si pintomu, asigitano come lange, tatan mami, igaiki hagi lange, nai ham Karahani nagmami taunasiha Nui dibin mami Dagri nasisi Dumi dibiham siha Tatamu hapumopoluna infan basna Now nothing libri ham gitai ladzi. Now nothing libri ham gitai ladzi.
Undakluna Sizos, Masi, Senator Mary Torres, and the beautiful singing from Senator Luis Muñoz. Sidus Masi and Sidus on Binidisi. Colleagues, at this time, I'd like to recognize Senator Regine Bisco Lee to lead us in the recognition of a recipient of the Milads and Mastakluna sacrificial.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, and Hafaday colleagues. On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Mess Attendant Second Class, World War II, Francisco U. Rivera, and the family of Mess Attendant Second Class, Francisco U. Rivera, for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
Sidus Masi, Senator Lee, and if you can kindly lead us in the recitation of Ina Fresi, you may proceed.
Ina Fresi, ginini mas takalu gina soku, imas takalum di corazonhu. Zani mas figu nani nasinyahu, hu ufresin maisadu, para bai kutahi, zani defendi, I hinengi, I kultura, I linguahi, I airi, I hanu, zani tanu tamoru. Ni in shaku direktu ginin as duas tata, Esti hua fitma gihilui Biblia zani banderahu I banderan Guam.
Colleagues, for the singing of the Guam hymn in Chamorro and the singing of the national anthem, I would like to call upon the gentlemen members to lead us in the singing of both.
Nogitamolu Puritanota Kantai Matuna Nagitoru Hilugai Parai honra, parai gloria, aviva is blessed, parai honra, parai gloria, aviva is blessed, todo I tempo I pas, paraita, Zambini na bendición. Contra peligro, navahan safuham, Deus protegis land Guam. Contra peligro, navahan safuham, Deus protegis land Guam. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail, and the twilight's as gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watch, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bursting in air, they proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the hope of the brave.
Si Jules Masi, gentlemen, colleagues, thank you. Please have a seat. At this time, Madam Clerk Hadziman Gagi Gwini put for vote. Please take roll call.
Senator Castro,
Señora.
Senator Lee,
Buenas Gagia.
Senator Marsh Titano, Senator Moylan, Senator Munya, Speaker Munya Barnes,
Manana si Jules Kagya.
Vice Speaker Nelson, Senator Perez, Senator Rangel, Senator San Augustine,
Gagizu.
Senator Shelton, Senator Taitagui, Senator Pito Terlahi, Senator Therese Terlahi, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Si Jules Masi, Madam Clerk. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized at this time. Good morning.
Mananasitu is Maskehalu. I move to approve the Legislative Journal dated September 16th, 2020, subject to corrections.
On the motion to approve the Legislative Journal dated November 16th, 2020, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none. Motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Taitanu, you are recognized.
Maskehalu, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that communications and petitions be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Maskehelu, there are messages from E. Magahagan Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Colleagues, on the motion that messages from Imagahagan Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Taitunu, you are still recognized.
Maskehelu, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Colleagues, on the motion that reports of standing committees be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Taitunu, you are still recognized.
Maskehelu, there are no reports of select committees.
Thank you. Please proceed.
I move that bills introduced, bills number 428-35 LS and 429-35 COR, and resolutions introduced, resolution number 394-35 LS, and be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion, colleagues, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Taitunu, you are still recognized.
Maskehelu, I move to excuse those senators not present for today's session.
On the motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, Senator Marsh Taitunu, you are still recognized at this time.
Maskehelu, I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of the legislative session be considered first read and adopted to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
Colleagues, on that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. At this time, I will recognize Legislative Secretary, Senator Amanda Shelton. You are recognized.
Sijis Masi, Madam Speaker, Hafaday colleagues, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Higher Education and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Frank P. Areola to serve as a member of the Guam Community College Board of Trustees with the recommendation to do confirm.
Legislative Secretary, and if you can cite what discipline, business, industry, and
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Frank P. Areola to serve as a member, business, industry, and employer organization representative of the Guam Community College Board of Trustees.
on that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. At this time, Senator Marsh Taitunu, Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sainamaasi Maskehelu. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Heritage and the Arts, Parks, Guam Products, Hagåtña Revitalization, Self-Determination, and Regional Affairs the nomination of Christine M. Wolk to serve as member of the Hagåtña Restoration and Redevelopment Authority Board of Commissioners with the recommendation to do confirm.
Thank you, Senator. On that motion, colleagues, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. At this time, I will recognize Senator Therese Terlaye. You are recognized.
Buenas. I'd like to move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice the nomination of Scott R. Shea, MD, to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners with the recommendation to report out.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator,
Sorry.
please proceed.
Thank you. I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice the nomination of Louis G. Cruz, MD, to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners with the recommendation to report out.
On the motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Colleagues, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clerk. At this time, we are on the second reading file, and at this time, I would like to recognize Minority Leader, Senator Sabina Perez. I do apologize, I didn't see you before we start.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to reconsider the agenda, the order in which the bills are listed. We can go back to reconsider the agenda regarding the order.
Senator Lee, I'm going to go ahead and recognize you on a point of information. Can I-
Mrs. Mossy, Madam Speaker, just on a point of information, there were two motions that were passed in the Committee on Rules meeting last week. One of them was to group bills that would potentially be needing Committee of the Whole discussions into one section. And then a second motion was made to also allow for one round of bills for each member of the body, and then to continue with another second round, just in fairness to allow all of our colleagues to have their bills heard, at least one bill heard in this, our very last session. And so the current order reflects those two motions, and so I just want to remind the body that that's what the Committee on Rules, the motions that were made and was decided by the members of CORE. And so I just want to put that on the record, and that's the reason why we
Yeah.
we
Thank-
accommodated those motions.
Thank you, Senator Lee. And based on that, I want to apologize to the members. I was not here on Friday. I'm going to take a moment's recess so I can hear a proposal before we get this motion going. We are on a moment's recess. Colleagues, Imina 35 na legislatura in Guam is back from recess, and at this time, after conferring with Senator Paris, I will allow her to make that motion to reconsider. Senator Paris, notwithstanding, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding House rules, I move to place Bill 314 in the first round and put 185 at the bottom of, at the bottom of this agenda.
Thank you, Senator Paris. So, colleagues, just to be clear, Senator Paris is the author of Bill 185-35 COR, and she is also the author of 314-85 LS, and she just wants to switch the bills in her place. On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. I will recognize you, Senator Taidagui, on your bill.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are still in motions, and at this time, I motion to place Bill 6-35 LS on the agenda, which is an act to repeal 8172.
Minority Leader, I do
Yes.
apologize. We are not in motions anymore. It was a motion to reconsider the replacement of the bill. We're not in motions, notwithstanding.
Madam
Because
Speaker.
we started Bill 56-35, getting clarification from the clerk.
Madam Speaker, there was no, after the last person spoke, it was Senator Terlahi to come in, and then raising my hand, you recognized
If you want to
Senator
overrule
Paris.
the presider, Minority Leader, you may do so at this time.
I'm sorry, say
You
again?
you have the first bill, Minority Leader. If
No.
you want to overrule the presider, because we are now in second reading file. There was a notwithstanding motion,
Then
and we've
okay.
cleared that.
Madam Speaker, then notwithstanding, I'd like to go back to motions then and place Bill 6-35 LS, an act to repeal 8172 of Article 1, Chapter 8, Title 4, Guam Code annotated relative to the responsible use of taxpayer funds through the elimination of the automatic retirement benefits for elected Guam governors, lieutenant governors, and their survivors to be
Senator-
placed.
So Minority Leader, first of all, it's a two-part motion.
Okay.
Notwithstanding, to revert back to motions, can you please state that motion, please?
Madam Speaker, thank you, I apologize.
No worries.
I make a motion, notwithstanding, to revert back to motions.
Motions. On that motion, are there any objections? Hearing none, seeing none, motion carries. Minority Leader, you are recognized.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. And again, Madam Speaker, I'd like to place on the agenda, the third reading file, Bill 6-35 LS, introduced by myself, an act to repeal 8172 of Article 1, Chapter 8, Title 4, Guam Code annotated, relative to the responsible use of taxpayer funds through the elimination of automatic retirement benefits for elected Guam governors, lieutenant governors, and their survivors.
At this time, Senator Lee, I will recognize you on a motion of point of information on Bill 6.
Sujos Masi, Madam Speaker, if I recall, this was discussed in the Committee on Rules meeting. There was a motion to place this bill. It did not pass. And in addition to that, the information that was shared with me was that we did not receive legal clarification on this bill. I believe there was an inquiry that was made by one of our members in terms of a separation of powers issue. And so we're still waiting on legal to come back to us on that. So just a point of information.
Point of information, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill was created, this law was
Senator-
created by the legislature. So
Senator,
there is no
with all due
separation of
respect,
powers.
This motion is not debatable, so I just
How
want
can
to...
it be not debatable when you allowed a point of
Because I'm
information?
allowing
I am doing a point
Minority
of
Leader-
information, Madam Speaker.
Minority
I have
Leader,
a point
please,
of
you're out.
information.
You are out of order at this time. I did want to state to you that based on the point of information provided to the Committee on Rules Chair for a decision on what had happened previously, I was not here last week. I want to share, I'm asking the Committee on Rules Chair for the information. You have a notwithstanding motion. You have read the title. Notwithstanding, it is not debatable. Is there an objection to this motion?
There is a point of information, Madam Speaker, where
Then I
everyone in
will
this
allow
body is
Minority
allowed
Leader-
that opportunity for a point of information.
Minority Leader, then I will acknowledge you at this time
Thank you, Madam
before
Speaker.
before the motion for a point of information. Please state your point of information.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for that. The point of information is the law that's current right now was created by this legislature. So there is no issue with separation of powers because the legislature created this law, and the legislature can taketh away. This is the same thing that was done in the CNMI and other jurisdictions that are following suit to save funding, to save money, taxpayer money. So this has nothing to do with legal, and if you'd like to take a short recess to talk with legal about this, then I'd be more than happy to. But I can tell you right now, this law was created by the legislature. So there is no separation of powers. And was there any question about that? None. So we are just repealing the law that we created as a
Duly-
legislature.
Duly noted, Minority Leader. With that being said, I will just take a moment's recess to seek legal clarification. Emina 35 na legislature in Guam is back from recess. Colleagues, on the motion, notwithstanding, to place Bill 6-35 LS onto the session agenda. Are there any objections? Are there any objections? There is an objection. All those wishing to place Bill number 6-35 LS to the agenda, please signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Colleagues, we are now on the second reading. Minority Leader, Senator Tello T. Tidegui, you are recognized on Bill number 56-35 COR. Please proceed.
Sijus Masi, and good morning, colleagues. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 56-35 COR as substituted by the Committee on Environmental Revenue and Taxation and Procurement, introduced by myself and Senator Will Castro, an act to add a new Article 4 to Chapter 12, Division 1, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to creating a task force to review information, conduct a feasibility study, and develop policy concerning submarine cables. I'd like to place it in the third reading file and speak on the bill, please.
On that motion, Senator Tidegui, Minority Leader, you may proceed.
Madam Speaker, can you just give me 1 second, please? 1 second.
Minority Leader, you are recognized.
Sijus Masi, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for that short recess. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss Bill 56-35 as substituted. And I'd like to thank the committee chair, Senator Sabina Paris, and her office for assisting to conducting 2 public hearings and preparing a committee report on Bill 56. Madam Speaker, just for my colleagues, because I've had a couple phone calls regarding this bill, a lot of them were looking at the first original bill that was introduced, and after having a public hearing and listening to some concerns we had, we amended that bill, the first bill that was introduced, amended it, and found that it was substantially different. Because of that, we had a second public hearing. So you'll find that there were 2 bills, but it's the latter one, of course. And you'll also find a testimony from Gita dated October 29th, referencing the substituted bill. And that's the bill that we are discussing today, Madam Speaker. And if any of my colleagues need a little bit more time to find it, because I do understand it is a bit confusing, because this bill did have 2 public hearings, and it was substantially different. Madam Speaker, Bill 56 proposes to put together a group representing GITA, the Public Utilities Commission, Office of Technology, Department of Revenue and Taxation, Legislature in Guam, and with my amendment, the University of Guam Research Center. That will look into these agencies and individuals will look into the submarine cables telecom industry on Guam, including a review of existing tax policies, license fees, and concerns with respect to the environment, and other aspects of the industry that may have been brought forward to federal regulatory agencies. As I publicly stated, this issue was brought to my attention during my work on revenue-generating policies as a special assistant to Governor Calvo. And in late 2018, by the former leadership of the Department of Revenue and Taxation, there was discussions involved the need for a thorough review of all taxes and fees that may or may not be assessed on owners and operators of submarine cables. For the benefit of the listening audience, submarine cables are described as cables laid on the ocean floor, which connect communities by providing means of telephone and internet communications. Madam Speaker, Guam has approximately 11 submarine cables, either pass-throughing or intermediate at Guam, with an additional 2 cables, which are projected to be ready for service in the next quarter of 2019, which we know there was a delay during COVID. In addition to our local telecommunications companies, there are major companies operating in consortium that include AT&T, Tata Telecommunication, RTI, TG, Google, Verizon, SoftBank, to name a few. Submarine cables are under the jurisdiction of the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, and other entities such as the US EPA, Department of State, and the US Army Corps of Engineers have a role in regulations. Madam Speaker, according to the FCC, which I had a conversation with myself as well as Melvin Tabales, who at the time was the Governor Lulian Guerrero's policy advisor, a director, and then moved to GITA. He and I were on a telephone communication between FCC, the White House, myself, that was orchestrated by NCSL. That's just a little information there. So, according to the FCC, the Commission said that Commission shall use of submarine cable landing license to entities that own and operate submarine cables and cable landing stations connected to the U.S., U.S. territories, and possessions to a foreign country. Again, the Commission shall issue a submarine cable license to the entities of U.S. territories and possessions. This also applies when cable is laid in international waters, connecting the continental U.S. with Alaska, Hawaii, U.S. territories, and U.S. possessions. At the federal level, the FCC imposes a yearly regulatory fee for each cable landing license, and the amount is determined annually based on capacity measure in gigabytes per second. And fees collected by the FCC are deposited directly to the U.S. territory, not Guam. I mean, U.S. Treasury, sorry, I said territory, but not the territory of Guam. So again, they are deposited directly to the U.S. Treasury. At the local level, AT&T and Tata's business license fees, now these are multi-billion-dollar companies. At a local level, AT&T and Tata's business license fees were $50 per license, which according to the representatives from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, are assessed for all service category businesses, and as shared by telecommunications representatives at both public hearings on Bill 56, they pay corporate, business privilege, and employee taxes. Madam Speaker, during October 16, 2019 conference call with the representatives from FCC, as I mentioned earlier, the national, with the NCSL, which I participated in, the discussion covered various aspects of the submarine cable telecommunication industry, including the assessment of one-time application and annual regulatory fee requirement for background security checks and involvement of a number of federal agencies. As I stated publicly, following the conference call, our discussion regarding various fees and regulations concerning submarine cables helped to clarify some of the concerns we have brought to my attention on this issue, such as the modernization of tax policies specific to telecommunication industry, and whether Guam is positioned to attract and support additional submarine cable investment. Madam Speaker, the task force proposed in Bill 56 will be responsible for conducting a feasibility study and specific study parameters focusing on expanding the telecommunication industry on Guam through a thorough review of tax policies, workforce needs, and potential incentive programs for data centers as discussed and supported by GITA. And representatives from the telecommunication industry during public hearing held on June 5th, 2019, and on September 11th, 2019, as stipulated. The task force will report back to the legislature so decision makers can review the findings and recommendations and develop policies that support responsible expansion and growth of the industry, particularly at a time when the impact of COVID-19 compels us to consider economic activities beyond tourism. So, Madam Speaker, before concluding remarks, I would like to offer 4 amendments to Bill 56. The first amendment is an update to the title of the proposed action. And the second is to add the University of Guam task force. And the last 2 amendments were requested by GITA Administrator Melanie Mendiola in her letter dated October 2019. So it has been uploaded, I believe, to the drive for my colleagues.
Minority Leader, I will take this as 4 different amendments, so we can go
Yes,
work it page by page, please.
sure. Thank you.
Page 1.
Yes, so the first amendment is on page 1, lines 4 to 8. And that just simply does, Madam Speaker, is put it up to date. It scratches out 2019 and makes it 2020. So this is on line 4
Page
to
1.
8, page 1.
Page 1, lines 4 to 8.
Yes.
On that motion, on that amendment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Minority Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Amendment 2 is on page 2, lines 5 and 8. And that basically incorporates the University of Guam as one of the members of the task force. And the reason why this was incorporated, after speaking with GITA, I found that a lot of information and data is at the University of Guam is available. And I believe when I was talking to Melvin Tabilis, there is a section at the University of Guam that does talk about telecommunications. So it goes hand in hand, and I think bringing all stakeholders to the table, especially those who are already doing research to the table, is a good idea.
On that amendment to add the President of the University of Guam or his or her designee, are there, Senator Lee, you're recognized. On the amendment.
Madam Speaker, just some clarification on the amendment. In addition to the University of Guam, it also includes the Speaker of the Legislature in Guahan and his or her designee?
Yes.
Okay.
It's already-
I just want to make sure, because there's, people following on YouTube and on our channel. I just want to make sure we're very clear about reading the entirety of the amendment, so everybody's clear about what we're doing moving forward. That being said, Madam Speaker, I do rise in support of this amendment. There are entities within the University of Guam that have been studying this issue for many, many years. Unfortunately, Guam lost one of the key players at UOG. He actually went back stateside and is now working at a university in California. But the brain trust of the University of Guam, especially as it relates to telecommunications and our connections in our region and as it relates to Asia Pacific and the world, I think are extremely important. So absolutely having somebody from the University of Guam who's well versed in these issues on this task force is going to be important. Sitos Masi.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Anyone else on the amendment? Are there any objections? Senator Therese, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Yes, I just wanted to, 2 things. So first of all, the other people listed on the floor amendment are already in the bill, the Director of Revenue and Taxation and the Speaker. So this amendment is only to add 1 more, which is the University of Guam President. And I don't object to that amendment, but I do remember that when I was first elected senator, the University of Guam called different senators, all the senators, I guess, for presentations up there. And one of the things that they talked about is that they were on pretty much the leading edge of research data transmission because they were hooked in with the Hawaii network to send, research. It's like a research network that goes from, especially to Asia, from Guam there. And that was, I remember at the time, being in awe and thinking, wow, I hope that we can use that to bring in Department of Education. Unfortunately, that's now about 4 years ago, and we're looking at the Department of Education, just struggling right now to get its wireless networking out there enough for students in all homes to be able to access school right now. So I just hope that, these people in this task force are all going to work towards, expanding this capacity for our entire island so that we can have people working at home, we can have students learning at home, and really growing Guam in so many ways that we can't even imagine right now. Otherwise, yes, I have no objection to adding the president to this list.
Thank you, Senator Chalai. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, are there any objections? Senator San Augustine, I will recognize you at this time.
Madam Speaker, from previous colleagues stated that revenue and tax legislature's on the bill already, it's only UOG, then maybe the author of the amendment needs to amend her amendment and take those others off and add and have legal or the clerks do the administrative adjustment, the letter D and E and F, let them fix that so that it doesn't appear, because right now in the amendment it appears that you're adding revenue and tax that's already on the bill, legislature that's already on the bill, and it's really only just UOG. So just to make the technical correction, and then we move on from there, because I think that's the issue. One is saying it's good, and I'm in support of the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. With that being said, it was just to insert the president of the University of Guam or his or her designee in between the Department of Revenue and Taxation and the Speaker of Legislature in Guahan. And the clerk has asked for a moment's recess. She'll fix the amendment just to give it clarity. On a moment's recess. Imina 35 na legislature in Guahan is back from recess. Colleagues, the clerk did work the amendment. It's on the drive if you can look at it. Senator San Augustine, if you can look at it, just make sure that everything's in order. And it just fix it, and it also allows legal to make that. So, Minority Leader,
Situs Masi, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker, it was just underlined twice now and to incorporate that it was included and didn't make it look like the other members were added in. And that was the concern. And also, Madam Speaker, to allow legal to make technical corrections is also noted on this amendment, cleaned up version. Thank you.
on the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Minority Leader, you still have the floor on your other amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, amendment number 3 of 4 begins on page 2, line 9. And it reads, the administrator of the Guam Economic Authority or his or her designee shall serve the presiding officer of the task force. Madam Speaker, this was at the request of Ms. Mignola for this amendment to the bill in order to ensure flexibility in the administration of the proposed task force and allowing the administrator to designate either a GITA staff member to preside at the task force meeting should the administrator not be available. It's just very simple.
Thank you. On the amendment, anyone wishing to speak? Are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries.
Madam
Any-
Speaker, oh,
Minority Leader, you still have the floor.
I apologize, Madam Speaker. I'm feeling the rush of trying to get these bills through. So amendment number 4, Madam Speaker, is on page 3, line 5 to 7. And it reads, letter E, submit a report with the recommendations of Imagahagan or Mahagan Guahan and Legislature Guahan by June 30, 2022, and any further recommendation shall be submitted annually thereafter. Madam Speaker, what I'm doing is amending the original date of June 30, 2020, which of course, you know, it's outdated. And it was mentioned in her testimony, you know, to not really have a date put in place on her comment on number 2. However, Madam Speaker, I don't think any of us wants to just leave it open and allow them to, you know, what's that word, lollygag? It's a common word, but I do realize the importance of what GITA does, you know, on a daily basis, as well as the situation that we're in right now with the pandemic. And so I think, Madam Speaker, by adjusting it to give GITA a year and a half to come up with this study, and in the event, I'm sure like any laws that we put forward, if they're unable to do it, you know, they will contact the legislature and maybe we can do an extension thereof. But right now, I think a year and a half is quite a bit of time for them to provide this study and information. And that's what this bill does, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader.
I mean,
On
this
the
amendment.
on the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Minority Leader, on the main bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to place on as a co-sponsor of the bill Senator Regine Biscoe-Lee. And I think it's very important because I know that Senator Lee has done some extensive work as well. She had a visit to Washington, D.C., where she met with the Office of Digital Service Industry, looking into communications, telecommunications, and done extensive work on it. So I would like to incorporate her as a co-sponsor of the bill.
Thank you. On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Minority
And-
Leader?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And one more co-sponsor of the
Sure.
bill, I'd like to incorporate Sabina Paris, who is the committee oversight chair of this legislation. That she did some work on it, and I'd like to thank her and for her interest in this as well. And I think she sees a potential here. So with that, and I really appreciate all the work she did on this legislation. So thank you, Madam Speaker. If I could have Senator Perez as a co-sponsor as well.
On that motion to add Senator Perez, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Anyone else on the main motion? Assistant Majority Leader, you're recognized on the main motion.
Senator Maasi Maskahilu. I do have an amendment. I had spoken with the author of the bill, and she is in support of this amendment. It just adds a little bit of language of flexibility, which is very standard for task forces such as this. So it is on the drive, if people can look for that. I believe it shows up first.
Please read your amendment.
Senator Maasi. So this is for line 15, page 2, to amend section 1 of the bill to read, in making recommendations, the task force shall, and then adding in the little bit of flexibility there, have the following duties as is feasible, including but not limited to. So as they get in there and do the work, there may be additional things that they want to look at or other aspects that they want to add to this. And so we just want to make sure it's absolutely clear that they can do so.
On the amendment, thank you, Assistant Majority Leader. Senator Parrish, you are recognized on Senator Marsh-Titano's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. I think it's very wise to have this flexibility because as we do the studies, like the author mentioned, there may be something that comes up. And I think also with the technology, rapidly changing, there are issues such as artificial intelligence. I mean, the increase in the capability of that, and what are some of the potential impacts. And I hope that that could be one of the topics that will be looked into. In addition to looking at how perhaps the technology can better serve the people here as well. And I do support the bill and overall, and because I think this is one of, we talk about strategic positions. Guam is in a strategic position, and the ability for the infrastructure to be developed here. We've yet to capitalize on this, and it could definitely lead to a greater diversification of our economy and building up a workforce to match that. Situas Masi.
Thank you, Senator Parrish. On the amendment, anyone else wishing to speak? Senator Chalayi, you're recognized.
Thank you, and thank the author for this amendment, because I too was concerned, because at the public hearing, the testimony was very clear that those in the industry right now who do have leases for submerged cables, particularly GTA and Docomo, they had asked us to concentrate, instead of more regulations for those, to concentrate more on how to incentivize data centers and other opportunities for Guam. And they said that there was great potential, but they did point out about the data centers. They said, we are competing now with South Korea, Singapore, Thailand, who've rolled out aggressive and attractive incentives for data center operations. They're hoping that this study will GITA will come back to us with things in that regard to make data center operations viable and attractive here. They said they will probably come back and tell us about the high costs of electricity, employee costs, and construction costs. So I think that this amendment hopefully will help to make sure data centers are, if that's what they want to focus on, that they're able to do that. And I support that. And I know that they've talked about data centers in their CES, if I'm not mistaken. They've talked about data centers I'm talking about GITA now, and they've talked about data centers in the recent, industry forum that the chamber had, as all these, new industries to try to diversify our economy. So I support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Therese. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, Motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, you still have the floor. You've got a couple of minutes on the main motion.
Assigned Ma'asi and Mazga Halu. I just appreciate all of the work and effort that various members of this body, including the author, have put into this. We are needing to look at ways that are lifting up the community and expanding our horizons, not just in certain ways, but ways that we're developing careers and other sorts of opportunities that are offering more for our community. And so it does seem that in the way that the world is moving, that a bill like this, a task force like this, and having that flexibility to look at what is a best fit for Guam really has the potential to do those things. Sijuas Mahasi.
Sijuas Masi, Assistant Majority Leader, on the main motion, Senator Castro, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the main motion, given the statements from the prior speaker, I think it's appropriate that I restate for the record again some of the concerns, I address some of the concerns that were raised at the public hearing. With that said, as has been my position on most matters on the whether it's commerce or the environment, anytime the Guam Legislature makes a move to require further analysis and study, anytime we can empower the people to have a public debate or even further the discussion to advance a discourse on an important matter, if it's involving the public's assets or if it's holding some kind of promise to improve the quality of life for the people, this is something I will always support. So I can recall having discussions as a former cabinet member as well from a prior administration, or even as a member to regional planning bodies, or even as a grad student looking at technology management and education, that while this technology has been around for quite some time, as a prior speaker mentioned, the timing for such a study is appropriate given the great fiscal fragility of the territory. Someone also mentioned here that there's potential upside to additional revenue streams that may come before the government of Guam as a result of the study. And in addition to that, someone also mentioned that perhaps there are specific skilled labor positions that's directly associated with that kind of growth. But I do want to say, Madam Speaker, that I would not have risen in support of the measure, nor would I have agreed to co-champion this particular proposal if it somehow was to raise the barrier of entry for new entrants or in any way retard the growth or make it harder for this industry or its affiliates to mature and prosper. As a matter of fact, as I stated at the public hearing, and the prime sponsor knows this well, that frankly, I'm hoping the opposite is true, that the emergent results from such a study may enlighten this body and this administration to further develop a corporate climate that would facilitate this kind of growth. And so not only was this found in Gita's testimony as submitted at the public hearing, which you will find in the committee report, but this is something that I find to be common among members of the body. So with that said, Madam Speaker, I stand in support of the bill as amended and encourage my colleagues to please vote the same way. And let's allow the resulting data to drive future discussions and potential policy outcomes for the people of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. On the main motion, there's nobody else. Minority Leader, you may close.
Sijuas Mahasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 56 codifies a task force prioritizing a necessary and thorough review of all things submarine cables. It legitimizes such an important initiative, and it provides a platform for local and federal agencies, non-government organizations, and representatives from the private sector to discuss this important aspect of our economy and the plan for a responsible expanding going forward. Madam Speaker, post-COVID-19, the passage of Bill 56 is critical to our collective efforts to expand our limited economy through submarine cables. creating industry-specific technical jobs ranging from program managers to data center engineers, and supporting other employment opportunities through construction of new data centers and additional utilities, and other supports required to establish the operations and these facilities. With that, I ask my colleagues to support Bill 56 so that our government will have an opportunity, will have an appropriate forum and an opportunity to engage experts, regulatory agencies, and other stakeholders regarding the future of this critical telecom industry in Guam and our region. Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker.
On the motion to put it in the voting file, please.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. I ask that we place Bill 56-35 COR in the voting file.
On that motion to place Bill number 56-35 COR into the voting file, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. We are on Bill 312-35 COR in LS. Senator Sabina Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's Bill 314 LS, as amended by the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice. It's an act to amend Section 3410, 34.30, 34.40, and 34.50, all of Chapter 34, Title 9 Guam Code, annotated relative to the prevention and prosecution of wildfires as a threat to persons, property, and the environment, sponsored by myself and co-sponsored by Speaker Tina Rose Barnes and Senator Clinton E. Rigel.
Move to the third reading to discuss.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And I move to place this on the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed, Senator Perez.
Bill 314-35 seeks to add the burning of, quote, forest land as a prohibited action under Guam's arson statute. By adding this language to our statutes, Bill 314-35 will help address the increasingly serious wildfires we are experiencing in Guam. This will help preserve our fragile environment as well as protect the lives, homes, businesses, and property of the people of Guam. I thank my co-sponsors, Speaker Munia Barnes and Senator Rigel, for their support on this important measure. At the beginning of this year, the world witnessed shocking photos and videos of wildfires that tore through Australia and laid unprecedented destruction to the continent's fragile and cherished ecosystem. The scale and ferocity of the blazes devastated entire communities, and scientists warn this summer may bring even more danger. Subsequently, the world's attention turned to the west coast of the U.S. as they saw deadly fires spread with explosive force, destroying neighborhoods and forcing tens of thousands to evacuate at-risk areas. These examples serve as a deadly wake-up call for leaders around the world who must improve laws and regulations to prepare for decades of increasing challenges ahead. Strong policies are needed to reduce carbon emissions, warming the atmosphere and creating hotter, drier environments that fuel wildfires. But locally, we must take additional steps to combat a growing problem on Guam: wildfire arson. Wildfires on Guam burn an average of 3.5% of the island's area each year, and these uncontrolled fires threaten native and endangered species, expose areas to invasive plant species and grasses such as swordgrass, which further increases future fire risk. And in many cases, these fires are set by unethical hunters who use arson as a tool to frighten and corral their prey. Unfortunately, our current laws do not adequately address this type of arson that leads to most wildfires. So in March of this year, I introduced this bill, 314-35, which seeks to add burning of forest land as an additional prohibited action under Guam's arson statute. Bill 314-35 was developed through the Bureau of Statistics and Plans under the guidance of the AG's office, Department of Agriculture, and other stakeholders, will allow the reckless burning of forest land, defined as any brush, covered land, cut over land, forests, grasslands, jungle, or woods. And by including forest lands in the arson statute, the measure will allow the AG's office to better prosecute arsonist poachers. The state of California has adopted similar language, which enabled them to better enforce arson laws against those who intentionally set wildfires. The threat to Guam is very real. Local authorities, including the Office of the Attorney General, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, Guam Coastal Management Program, Guam Department of Agriculture's Forestry and Soil Resources Division, confirm that poachers are increasingly using arson when hunting for game. And with climate change creating hotter, drier environments, these arsonists are setting wildfires that increasingly endanger lives, property, and our environment. The threat posed by wildfires in Guam are shocking. According to the Pacific Fire Exchange, a federally funded consortium of researchers and government entities who exchange data and science on fire-related topics in the Pacific region, 468 wildfires burned 4.7% of our island, which is 6,251 acres, including 290 acres of native forest in just 2018. In 2019, the Guam Department of Agriculture recorded an increase to 7% of our island being burned by wildfires in just 1 year. These numbers are even more disturbing when one realizes that wildfires in Guam are rarely started due to natural causes, such as lightning. According to the Pacific Fire Exchange and the Guam Department of Agriculture, most wildfires are set by people. The impacts of arsonists are not only restricted to our island's terrestrial ecosystem. Wildfires also threaten our marine ecosystem and fishing way of life. Because of unchecked blazes, destroy plants and environmental features that prevent erosion. The resulting runoff flows into Guam's waterways and into our seas, harming Guam's coral reefs and fish stocks. Wildfire arsonists are also destroying our island's fragile coral ecosystem. The growing climate change emergency and resulting hotter and dry environment will increasingly expose our island to similar dangers as those witnessed internationally. Given this reality, we can proactively improve our regulations in an effort to reduce incidents that lead to wildfires. Bill 314-35 strengthens our laws by clearly outlawing the burning of forest land and holding arsonists accountable for their reckless actions. We must take a strong stance in order to protect our environment, our lands and waters, and our lives. I look forward to the discussion and questions by my colleagues. Siduos Masi.
Thank you, Senator Paris. On the main motion, anyone wishing to speak? Anyone wishing to speak? If not, Senator Marshall, Assistant Majority Leader, you are recognized on the main motion.
Saina Ma'asi Maske Halu. I want to commend the author for what really appears to be a straightforward solution. And I know that there were many that were part of finding this solution and working together on behalf of the entire community. The AG's office was involved, the Department of Agriculture with their forestry unit, and others have been working diligently over the last several years in many ways, but more recently in really developing their training so that they can investigate these sorts of wildfires. And actually, their hope is to be able to prosecute and really help stem some of what has become a major issue. As the former speaker was mentioning, 4 to 7% of our island is on fire every year. That's an incredible amount, and it's much higher that, from my understanding of what's going on in individual states at that sort of a rate. Sometimes we reach as many as 700 or 800 fires in one, which has unfortunately become called as a fire season. And although the work that's in this bill is very straightforward, it has the potential to do so much for the community. Whether we realize it or not, we are all affected by wildfires. And we all pay a heavy price for them. Whether it's government resources, the amount of monies that must be spent on vehicles and equipment, and water, even just the water itself can become quite daunting as a cost. People are putting their lives on the line. We did see firefighters that got injured this last year, and so forth. So there's monies there, there's personnel that are being utilized, and those exact same personnel are a strong part of our emergency system. If somebody is having a health issue at home or an issue that needs to be addressed by an EMT, that is a large part of what those firefighters do. And so they must become divided with their attention and ability during that fire season especially. It was also mentioned that this affects the health of our environment and thus the sustainability of our environment. It gets down to the fishing, it gets down to the health of our corals and our reefs, which our tourism relies on. It affects us at so many levels. And badlands, as they mentioned, are nearly non-rehabilitable. It's very, very difficult to rehabilitate the soil once it becomes badland. And our wildfires are a quick recipe to just keep our badlands growing. Unfortunately, it's kind of shocking when we drive around the island to see these huge patches of badlands just expanding and expanding. Not only that, it affects the health and well-being of our community. People who suffer respiratory illnesses, asthma, and so forth, this is exacerbated, of course, by the heavy smoke that hangs in the air. And every year, there's an increasing number of people who must flee their homes and be evacuated, taking whatever they can get a hold of, and hoping that the memories that are locked up in their homes are still there when they return, that they haven't been burnt away or some sort of loss. As we continue to urbanize, as we continue to develop as a community, there is more and more a clash between our community and those wildfires. And one of the things that was brought up during the hearing that I hadn't heard before is there seems to be this perhaps growing correlation between those that are looking for easy money for drugs and these wildfires, and then the hunting that happens after them. And so if there is indeed that correlation, that is something that we as a community need to be extremely concerned about and have that additional concern as to stemming this. So for those many reasons, I support this bill. I think we have a lot to gain from it. Our government resources are stretched incredibly at this time, as we all know. And so anything that we can do to stem the waste and the use of these resources when we could be taking preventative actions instead, I think we need to lean towards the direction of preventative actions. So, Suzuis Masi, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Assistant Majority Leader. On the main motion, no one else wishes to speak. Senator Parrish, you may close and put it on the voting file.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would like to thank the retiring speaker about mentioning what was said in the public hearing regarding connection to drugs. And so we did amend the bill to allow for some sort of restitution, because that was one of the comments that was made, that so for every 3 acres that are reforested, 1 acre survives a forest fire, and roughly about $75,000 per acre is spent. And so the idea of restorative justice, that to, maybe open the eyes of the person who committed the arson, that the amount of work that it takes to reforest the wildlands may be one way to help address the roots of the problem. And so that was one of the amendments that was made in the bill. And so just to close on the bill, I think, the threats to Guam are really real regarding arson in our wildlands. And considering that the incidences are increasing from 2018 to 2019, this change in the law is very significant, and it has will have an impact in ensuring that the prosecution can take place. So Bill 314-35 strengthens our laws by clearly outlining the burning of forest land and holding arsonists accountable for their reckless actions. And we must take this strong stance in order to prevent the wildfire arson that threatens our local ecosystems, our native endangered species, our waterways and fish stocks that are severely impacted by arson-created sediment, and even our health during this pandemic. We must protect our environment, our lands and waters, and our lives. And I ask my colleagues for their support in passing Bill 314-35. Suzuis Masi.
On the motion to place it on the third reading?
I move to place Bill 314-35 LS on the voting file.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing or hearing none, motion carries. Assistant Majority Leader, on a motion to recess to...
Sana Maasi Maske Halu. I motion that we recess until 2 p.m.
We will be in recess till 2 p.m. this afternoon. Have a good lunch, colleagues. Please be safe.